The university library on station Kepler 7 was always quiet during the late evening hours. Most students had gone back to their quarters, tired from another day of advanced physics lectures and xenobiology seminars. But, in the far corner, near the massive window that showed the endless stars outside, a young human woman sat alone with her tablet. Her name was Maya Chen. She was 22 years old, small in size, with dark hair that she always kept tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore the plain gray uniform of a third-year engineering student, and her fingers moved slowly across her tablet as she studied complex equations. Her face was calm, almost sleepy, and she rarely looked up from her work. The other students at Kepler 7 knew very little about Maya. She had arrived 2 years ago from Earth, from a small city in the Asian continent that most aliens had never heard of. She spoke softly, never raised her voice, and spent most of her time alone. In group projects, she did her work without complaint but rarely offered opinions. During mealtimes, she sat at empty tables and ate quickly before leaving. Some students thought she was shy. Others thought she was strange. A few believed she simply did not like anyone. But the truth was simpler than all of these guesses. Maya Chen was just someone who preferred silence over noise, and books over conversation. The Kepler 7 station was home to over 50,000 beings from across the galaxy. It floated in neutral space, a massive structure of metal and glass that served as one of the most respected educational centers in the known universe. Students came from hundreds of different species to study here. There were tall, blue-skinned Veltari who breathed through gills on their necks. There were the four-armed Graxians who could solve mathematical problems faster than computers. There were the insect-like Chitauri, the stone-bodied Gorvans, and dozens of other species that humans were still learning about. Humans had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago. When the first contact happened, Earth was considered a primitive world, full of violent history and strange customs. The galaxy watched humans with curiosity and some concern. These small, soft creatures had somehow survived thousands of years of war with themselves. They had created both beautiful art and terrible weapons. They were unpredictable in ways that made older species nervous. Maya was part of the third generation of humans to study off-world. Her parents had saved money for 15 years to send her to Kepler 7. They believed their daughter would have a better future among the stars than back on Earth, where jobs were scarce and opportunities limited. Maya had promised them she would study hard, graduate with honors, and find good work that would help her family. She kept that promise every single day. Her grades were perfect. Her attendance was flawless. She caused no trouble and asked for no special treatment. The teachers barely noticed her because she never gave them any reason to pay attention. But Maya Chen had a secret. Every night, after finishing her studies, she would return to her small room in the student quarters. She would change out of her uniform and put on simple exercise clothes. Then, she would leave the station through a maintenance passage that few people knew about. She would take a small transport pod to the lower rings of the station, where the entertainment districts operated around the clock. There, in the depths of Kepler 7, was a place called the Pit. The Pit was an underground fighting arena. It was technically illegal, but the station authorities looked the other way as long as the violence stayed contained. Beings from all species came to the pit to watch fighters compete in hand-to-hand combat. There were no weapons allowed, just bodies and skill. The fights were brutal, bloody, and incredibly popular. Maya had discovered the pit during her first month on the station. She had wandered into the lower rings by accident, lost while trying to find a cheap food stall. The sounds of cheering had drawn her to a hidden door, and what she saw inside had changed her life. Fighting was something Maya understood deeply. Back on Earth, she had trained in martial arts since she was 5 years old. Her grandfather had been a master of an ancient style that combined elements of many different combat forms. He had taught Maya everything he knew, not to make her violent, but to give her discipline and confidence. He said that a person who truly understood fighting would never need to prove it through anger. Maya had taken those lessons seriously. She had never been in a real fight before arriving at Kepler 7. She had never hurt anyone, never even raised her fist in anger. But she knew how to move, how to breathe, how to see the weaknesses in any opponent. Her grandfather had given her a gift that she kept hidden, like a blade wrapped in silk. When Maya first entered the pit as a spectator, she watched for 3 nights without speaking to anyone. She studied the fighters, both alien and human. She noticed their techniques, their mistakes, their patterns. She saw how the Graxians relied too much on their extra arms, leaving their lower bodies exposed. She saw how the Veltari were fast but tired quickly because their gill breathing was not designed for extended combat. She saw that most fighters use strength alone, without any understanding of leverage or timing. On the 4th night, Maya approached the fight organizer, a massive reptilian creature named Crix who had lost one eye in a match decades ago. She told Crix she wanted to fight. The organizer looked at her small body and laughed so hard that other beings turned to watch. A human female wanted to fight in the pit. This was comedy. But Maya did not move. She did not speak again. She simply stood there, waiting, until Crix stopped laughing and noticed that her eyes were completely serious. There was something in those eyes that made the old fighter uncomfortable. He had seen thousands of challengers come through his doors. Most of them had fire in their eyes, anger, pride, the desire to prove something. Maya had none of that. Her eyes were calm like deep water, and Crix realized he could not see the bottom. He agreed to give her one match against a weak opponent, a young Veltari who had lost his last 3 fights. If Maya lost, she would never return. If she won, they would talk. Maya agreed to these terms. The match happened 30 minutes later. Maya walked into the fighting circle wearing her exercise clothes while the crowd jeered and made jokes. The Veltari opponent was twice her size, with long arms and sharp reflexes. He looked at Maya with pity, wondering why this small human would embarrass herself this way. The fight lasted 9 seconds. Maya moved so fast that most of the audience missed what happened. The Veltari threw a punch, which she avoided by tilting her head slightly to the side. In the same motion, she stepped forward, placed her palm against his chest, and pushed. The push did not look strong, but the Veltari flew backward as if hit by a vehicle. He crashed into the wall of the arena and did not get up. The crowd went silent. Crix checked the Veltari and confirmed he was unconscious but alive. Then, the organizer walked to Maya, who stood calmly in the center of the arena, not even breathing hard. He asked her what name she wanted to fight under, since all pit fighters used fake names to protect their identities. Maya thought for a moment. She remembered her grandfather, who had always told her that the strongest fighters were like ghosts. You could not see them, could not hear them, could not understand them until it was too late. She told Crix her fighting name was Ghost. That was 18 months ago. Since then, Ghost had become a legend in the pit. She had fought 47 matches and won all of them, most in under a minute. She never seriously injured her opponents, always stopping just before causing permanent damage. She never showed anger, never celebrated her victories, never spoke to the crowds that increasingly came just to see her. After each fight, she simply bowed to her fallen opponent and left the arena. The mystery of Ghost became the biggest story in the underground fighting world. Who was she? Where did she come from? How could a human, a member of a species known more for technology than physical ability, defeat fighters from races that were bred for combat? Some theories said she was a military experiment, a soldier created in a secret Earth laboratory. Others believed she was not human at all, but an android designed to look like one. A few claimed she had made a deal with dark forces, trading her soul for unnatural abilities. The truth, that she was simply a quiet student with exceptional training, never occurred to anyone. Maya kept her 2 lives completely separate. During the day, she was the invisible student who sat in the back of classrooms and spoke to no one. At night, she was Ghost, the unstoppable fighter who had never lost. No one at the university knew about the pit, and no one at the pit knew about her studies. She liked it that way. The credits she earned from fighting helped pay for things her scholarship did not cover. She sent some money home to her parents, telling them she had found a part-time job tutoring other students. This was not entirely a lie, since she did help a few classmates with their homework from time to time. Tonight, however, something was different. Maya looked up from her tablet and noticed a group of students gathered near the library entrance. They were watching something on a large display screen, whispering excitedly to each other. Maya recognized some of them as members of the station's athletic association, young beings who took physical competition very seriously. Curiosity was not usually one of Maya's weaknesses, but something about their excitement made her close her tablet and walk closer. She stood at the edge of the group, unnoticed as always, and looked at the screen. The display showed an advertisement for something called the Galactic Combat Championship. Maya had heard of this event before. It was the most prestigious fighting tournament in the known universe, held every 3 years on a neutral planet. Fighters from all species competed for the title of champion, and the matches were broadcast to trillions of viewers across thousands of worlds. This year's tournament was special, the advertisement explained. For the first time, the championship was opening a new category for amateur fighters. Any being could enter, regardless of species or background. The preliminary rounds would happen on various stations throughout the galaxy, and the winners would advance to the main event on the championship planet. One of the preliminary locations was Kepler 7. Maya felt something stir inside her chest, a feeling she rarely experienced. It was not excitement exactly, more like recognition. Her grandfather had once told her that every fighter, no matter how peaceful they seemed, waited their whole life for the moment when they would be truly tested. He said this moment would come without warning, like lightning from a clear sky, and the fighter would have to choose whether to step forward or stay hidden. Maya wondered if this was her moment. She shook her head and returned to her table. This was foolish thinking. She had her studies, her responsibilities, her promises to her parents. The ghost of the pit could stay in the shadows where she belonged. There was no need to step into the spotlight of a galactic broadcast. She opened her tablet again and tried to focus on her equations. But the numbers would not stay still in her mind. They kept dancing away, replaced by thoughts of the championship, of testing herself against the best fighters in the galaxy, of finally seeing how good she really was. Stop it, she told herself. You are not that person. You are Maya Chen, quiet student. That is all you need to be. But, deep inside, in the place where her grandfather's teachings lived, a small voice whispered something else. You are ghost. And ghosts do not hide. They wait. The next morning brought news that spread through the university like fire. The Galactic Combat Championship organizers had announced something unexpected. They were partnering with Kepler 7's athletic department to host a special event. Any student could register for the preliminary tournament without needing previous fighting credentials. The university was treating this as an opportunity for cultural exchange and physical education. This announcement caused immediate chaos. Suddenly, everyone was talking about fighting, even species that normally showed no interest in physical combat. Students signed up by the hundreds, imagining themselves as future champions. The athletic facilities became crowded with beings practicing punches and kicks that looked more ridiculous than dangerous. Maya watched all of this from her usual corner of the library. She found it amusing how quickly everyone had become fighting experts. Students who had never thrown a punch in their lives were now discussing technique and strategy as if they had trained for decades. The Graxians formed practice groups where they tried new four-armed combinations. The Veltari worked on their speed drills. Even the normally peaceful Chitauri were clicking their mandibles in what looked like aggressive preparation. She had no plans to join this madness. The pit was enough fighting for her. Entering the official tournament would require using her real name, showing her real face, and potentially revealing everything she had kept hidden. But fate had other plans. 3 days after the announcement, Maya was walking through the station's commercial district when she heard screaming. The screams came from a small food stall owned by an elderly Gorvan couple, rock-like beings who sold simple soups and bread to students who could not afford the fancier restaurants. Maya had eaten at this stall many times. The old Gorvans were kind and always gave extra portions to students who looked hungry. They reminded her of her own grandparents back on Earth. She pushed through the gathering crowd and saw the problem immediately. For large beings were destroying the stall. They were Crothians, a warrior species known for their massive size and terrible tempers. Each one stood over 2 meters tall, with gray skin covered in natural armor plates. They were throwing tables, breaking equipment, and laughing while the old Gorvans tried to protect their livelihood. A station security officer stood nearby, speaking into his communicator, but he made no move to interfere. The Crothians were members of a diplomatic family, Maya overheard someone say. They had immunity from most station laws. No one would stop them. The largest Crothian grabbed one of the old Gorvans by the arm and threw her against the wall. She hit hard, and the sound of cracking stone echoed through the district. Gorvan bodies were tough, but they could still be broken. Maya felt something cold settle over her mind. It was a familiar feeling, one she usually only experienced in the pit right before a match. Her grandfather had called it the quiet before the storm, the moment when all emotion disappeared and only action remained. She stepped forward. The Crothians did not notice her at first. Why would they? She was just a small human female, barely reaching their chest height. Humans were not known as fighters. They were the soft, new species that had only recently crawled out from their primitive world. Maya tapped the largest Crothian on the back. He turned around, already raising his fist to swat away whatever insect had dared to touch him. His fist came down like a falling building. But Maya was not there anymore. She had moved slightly to the side, so slightly that it looked like she had not moved at all. The Crothian's fist missed her by centimeters and slammed into the ground, cracking the metal floor. Before he could recover, Maya placed 2 fingers against a spot on his neck and pressed. The Crothian made a strange gurgling sound and collapsed. The other 3 Crothians stared at their fallen leader in shock. Then, they looked at Maya, and their shock turned to rage. They attacked together, using the coordinated assault tactics that made Crothian warriors feared across the galaxy. Maya flowed between them like water. She did not fight the way they expected. She did not meet force with force or try to match their strength. Instead, she redirected their attacks, using their own momentum to pull them off balance. She touched pressure points that sent jolts of pain through their armored bodies. She moved in ways that seemed impossible, always exactly where they were not looking. The fight lasted 23 seconds. When it ended, all 4 Crothians were on the ground, conscious but unable to move. Maya stood over them, breathing normally, her expression unchanged. The crowd was completely silent. Then, everyone started talking at once. Communicators came out, recording devices pointed at Maya's face, questions shouted from all directions. Someone called for medical help. Someone else called for station security. The old Gorvan woman crawled toward Maya and touched her hand with trembling fingers, tears streaming from her stone eyes. Maya looked at the crowd and realized she had made a terrible mistake. In 18 months of fighting at the pit, she had never once used her skills in public. She had always kept Ghost and Maya completely separate. Now, in a moment of anger, she had destroyed that separation forever. She turned and ran. But it was too late. The videos were already spreading across the station's network. Within an hour, they would be on every public channel. Within a day, they would reach the wider galaxy. A human female had single-handedly defeated 4 Crothian warriors in less than half a minute. The universe was about to meet Ghost. Maya did not leave her room for 3 days after the incident at the food stall. She locked her door, turned off her communicator, and ignored the knocking that came at all hours. She sat on her small bed and watched the video spread across every channel she could find. The footage was everywhere. Someone had captured the entire fight in perfect detail, and now trillions of beings across the galaxy were watching a small human woman disable 4 Crothian warriors. The videos had been shared so many times that they had their own designation code. News programs played the footage on loop while experts tried to explain what had happened. Fighting analysts slowed the video down frame by frame, trying to understand the techniques she had used. Most of them failed. They could see what Maya did, but they could not understand how she did it. Her movements looked simple, almost casual, yet they produced results that should have been impossible. One expert from the Veltari Combat Academy called it the most efficient display of unarmed combat he had ever witnessed. A Graxian martial artist claimed that Maya had used at least 7 different fighting styles in those 23 seconds, combining them in ways that no one had seen before. The name Ghost began appearing in the comments and discussions. At first, Maya did not understand how anyone made the connection. Then, she realized that some of the viewers were also people who attended matches at the pit. They recognized her movements, even though her face had never been shown in the underground arena. The way she shifted her weight, the angle of her strikes, the calm expression that never changed. These were signatures that could not be hidden. Ghost was real. Ghost was a student at Kepler 7. Ghost was a human. This information spread faster than the original videos. Suddenly, the story was not just about a fight at a food stall. It was about the legendary pit fighter whose identity had finally been revealed. It was about a human, from a species considered physically weak compared to most aliens, who had never lost a single match against any opponent. Maya watched her 2 worlds collapse into one and felt something she rarely experienced: fear. She was not afraid of fighting. She was not afraid of attention or fame. She was afraid of what this would mean for her life, her studies, her family. She had promised her parents that she would be a good student, that she would cause no trouble, that she would bring honor to their sacrifice. Now she had become the center of a galactic controversy. The Crothian diplomatic family was already demanding punishment. They claimed that Maya had attacked their sons without provocation, that she had used illegal combat techniques, that she was dangerous and should be expelled from the university. The station authorities were caught between wanting to support a student and not wanting to offend a powerful alien family. Messages flooded Maya's communicator even though it was turned off. When she finally checked, she found thousands of requests from news organizations wanting interviews. She found offers from fighting promoters wanting to sign her to contracts. She found threats from Crothian supporters who promised revenge. She found support from humans across the galaxy who saw her as a hero. And she found one message from Crix, the organizer of the pit. The message was simple: I always knew you were something special. Whatever you decide to do next, you have friends in the lower rings. Good luck, Ghost. Maya read that message several times. Then, she made a decision. On the 4th day, she finally left her room. She walked to the office of the university administrator, a Veltari named Professor Silas who had managed student affairs for over 40 years. She expected to find him alone, but when she entered, the office was crowded with beings she did not recognize. There were representatives from the Station Authority, from the Crothian Diplomatic Mission, from something called the Galactic Combat Federation. Professor Silas gestured for Maya to sit. His gill slits fluttered with stress, a sign that he was dealing with a very difficult situation. He began explaining that the university was facing pressure from multiple directions. The Crothians wanted Maya expelled and possibly arrested. The Station Authority wanted the controversy to disappear. The Combat Federation wanted something else entirely. The representative from the Combat Federation stood up. She was a Chitauri, one of the insect species that Maya had rarely interacted with. Her compound eyes reflected the light in ways that made her expression impossible to read. She introduced herself as Administrator Zeal, the head of tournament operations for the Galactic Combat Championship. Administrator Zeal spoke in the clicking language of her people, with a translation device converting her words to standard galactic speech. She said that the videos of Maya's fight had been viewed more times than any content in the history of their broadcast network. She said that beings across the galaxy were demanding to see more. She said that the Combat Federation was prepared to offer Maya something unprecedented. They wanted her to enter the Galactic Combat Championship. Not as an amateur in the student preliminary, but as a direct invitation to the main event. She would skip all qualifying rounds and go straight to the championship planet. Her matches would be broadcast to every world in the known universe. In exchange, the Combat Federation would use its influence to make the Crothian complaints disappear. Maya would face no punishment from the university or the station. Her scholarship would be protected, her future secured. All she had to do was fight. Maya sat in silence while everyone in the room waited for her response. She thought about her grandfather, about his lessons on the nature of combat. He had always said that fighting was not about violence. It was about understanding yourself and understanding others. A true fighter did not seek conflict but did not run from it either. She thought about her parents, who had sacrificed so much to give her this opportunity. What would they think if they saw her on galactic broadcasts, fighting aliens in front of trillions of viewers? Would they be proud or ashamed? She thought about the old Gorvan woman at the food stall, crying and holding her hand. She thought about all the beings who had been hurt by bullies like those Crothians, beings who had no one to stand up for them. And she thought about Ghost, the fighter she had created as a secret identity. Ghost had never lost. Ghost had never backed down. Ghost was the part of Maya that her grandfather had trained, the part that knew exactly what she was capable of. Maya looked at Administrator Zeal and asked one question. If she won the championship, what would happen? The Chitauri made a sound that might have been laughter. She said that no one had ever asked that question before. Most fighters talked about prize money, about fame, about sponsorship deals. No one asked about the actual outcome. But she answered anyway. If Maya won, she would become the Galactic Combat Champion. She would have her choice of any reward the Federation could provide. She would be famous across all known space. She would also become a symbol for her entire species. Humans were still considered newcomers to the galactic community. Many species did not take them seriously. They were seen as physically weak, short-lived, and historically violent in unproductive ways. A human winning the combat championship would change that perception forever. Maya thought about this for a long time. Then, she nodded. She would fight. The news broke within the hour. Every channel that had been showing Maya's food stall fight now displayed her official registration for the Galactic Combat Championship. Her fighting name was listed as Ghost, and her species was listed as human. No other information was provided. The galaxy went mad. Debate exploded across every platform. Could a human actually win the championship? Was Maya truly as skilled as the video suggested, or had she simply gotten lucky against overconfident Crothians? What techniques did she use? Where had she trained? Was she a representative of human potential or just an unusual exception? Some species were dismissive. The Crothians released statements claiming that their young warriors had been caught off guard and that any real Crothian fighter would destroy this ghost in seconds. The Veltari expressed polite doubt that a human could compete at the championship level. The Graxians calculated that statistically, no human had ever shown the physical capabilities necessary to defeat their champions. Other species were curious. The Gorvans sent messages of support, calling Maya a defender of the weak. Several human governments made statements welcoming this opportunity to showcase their species on the galactic stage. Independent analysts began studying every piece of footage they could find, trying to predict how Ghost would perform. In the pit, the news created a different kind of reaction. Crix closed the arena for 3 nights while he dealt with the chaos. Fighters who had lost to Ghost demanded to know why they had not been told she was entering the championship. Others claimed they should receive compensation for helping train her by being her opponents. A few quietly admitted that they had always known Ghost was something special. Maya ignored all of this. She returned to her studies and her regular routine as if nothing had changed. She went to classes, took notes, and did her homework. She ate alone at her usual table and avoided conversations with curious students who tried to approach her. But, at night, she trained harder than ever before. The championship was 3 months away. 3 months to prepare for the best fighters in the known universe. 3 months to learn their styles, their weaknesses, their patterns. 3 months to become something more than she had ever been. She studied videos of past championship matches. She watched the current champions from various species and analyzed their techniques. She found information about the Graxian master who had won the last 3 tournaments, a 4-armed giant named Craxus who was considered the greatest fighter of his generation. She learned about the Veltari speed specialist who could strike faster than most eyes could follow. She read about the Chitauri champion whose exoskeleton made her almost impossible to damage. These were the opponents she would face. Each one represented decades of training, genetic advantages, and combat experience that Maya could not match. On paper, she had no chance. But fighting was not done on paper. 2 weeks before the championship, something unexpected happened. A ship arrived at Kepler-7 carrying a passenger who requested to see Maya immediately. When she received the message, she did not recognize the name. But when she arrived at the docking bay and saw the old man waiting for her, she understood. Her grandfather stood there, smaller than she remembered, his hair now completely white. He wore simple traveling clothes and carried a bag that looked older than Maya herself. His eyes, still sharp despite his age, studied her face as she approached. Maya asked him what he was doing there. He was supposed to be on Earth, taking care of himself. The journey to Kepler-7 was dangerous for someone his age. Her grandfather smiled and said that he could not miss this moment. He had watched the videos like everyone else. He had seen his granddaughter use the techniques he taught her, and he knew she was ready for something greater. He had come to make sure she was prepared for what was about to happen. They spent the next 2 weeks together. Her grandfather did not teach her any new techniques. He said she already knew everything she needed to know. Instead, he talked about the philosophy of combat, about the mental state required to face opponents who seemed unbeatable. He told her stories of ancient warriors who had won impossible fights through will and wisdom rather than strength. He explained that the techniques she had learned were just tools. What mattered was the mind that used those tools. A hammer could build a house or break a skull, depending on who held it. Maya's training had given her the hammer. Now she needed to decide what she would build. The night before Maya left for the championship planet, her grandfather gave her a gift. It was a small piece of cloth, worn and faded, that had belonged to his own teacher. He said it had been passed down through generations of warriors, a symbol of the lineage she carried. He told her to keep it with her during her fights, to remember that she was never alone. Maya held the cloth against her chest and felt tears threatening to fall. She had not cried since she was a child. She did not cry now. Instead, she bowed deeply to her grandfather and thanked him for everything he had given her. He bowed back and said that no thanks were necessary. He was simply proud of who she had become. The championship planet was called Nexus Prime. It was an artificial world built specifically for galactic events, a massive sphere of metal and glass floating in neutral space. Over 5 billion beings lived there permanently, with another billion arriving for major tournaments like the Combat Championship. Maya arrived with a small group consisting of Professor Silas, who had volunteered to be her official representative, and a medical officer provided by the Combat Federation. She had no coaches, no trainers, no support staff. This was unusual for championship fighters, most of whom traveled with teams of dozens or even hundreds of specialists. The media noticed this immediately. Stories began appearing about the lonely human fighter who faced impossible odds with no help. Some outlets called it brave. Others called it foolish. A few suggested it was arrogant, that this ghost believed she did not need anyone's assistance. Maya ignored all of it. She found her assigned quarters, a small room in the fighter accommodation district, and began her final preparations. She reviewed her notes on every opponent she might face. She practiced her forms alone in the empty room. She meditated for hours, clearing her mind of doubt and distraction. The tournament structure was simple. 64 fighters had been selected from across the galaxy, representing the best of their species. They would compete in elimination matches, with winners advancing and losers going home. There were no weight classes, no species categories, no restrictions based on natural abilities. A 2-meter Crothian might fight a half-meter Chitauri. A creature with 4 arms might face one with none. The only rule was that the fight continued until one fighter could not continue or surrendered. Maya's first opponent was announced the morning of the tournament's opening day. She would face a Veltari named Silas Ven, a veteran fighter with over 200 professional victories. He was known for his incredible speed and his signature technique of striking opponents before they could react. The match was scheduled for the afternoon. Maya spent the morning in meditation, eating a small meal and stretching her muscles. She dressed in simple fighting clothes, the same kind she wore in the pit. She tucked her grandfather's cloth into her pocket, close to her heart. When she walked into the arena, the noise was overwhelming. Over 100,000 beings filled the stadium, with billions more watching through broadcasts. Giant screens showed her face as she crossed the fighting floor, and the announcers speculated about her chances against the experienced Veltari. Most predictions gave her a 20% chance of victory at best. The Veltari were known as one of the fastest species in the galaxy, and Silas Van was fast even by their standards. His strikes would come before Maya could see them. His reflexes would counter anything she tried. Maya stood in the center of the arena and waited. She felt the familiar coldness settling over her mind, the quiet before the storm. Around her, the crowd roared with anticipation. Cameras captured her from every angle. The weight of the entire galaxy pressed down on her shoulders. She did not feel any of it. She was Ghost now. Ghost did not feel pressure. Ghost did not know fear. Ghost only knew the moment, the opponent, the space between them. Silas Van entered from the opposite side. He was tall for a Veltari, with the lean body of someone built for speed. His gill slits fluttered rapidly, drawing in oxygen for the battle ahead. He looked at Maya with curiosity, trying to understand how this small human had become so famous. The signal sounded. The match began. Silas moved first, crossing the distance between them in a blur. His fist shot toward Maya's face at speeds that should have been impossible to track. Maya turned her head slightly. The fist passed through empty air. Silas recovered and attacked again, this time with a combination of strikes aimed at her body. Each one missed by centimeters as Maya shifted her position with minimal movement. She did not block, did not counter, did not even seem to try. She simply was not where his attacks landed. The crowd grew confused. This was not how fights worked. Someone was supposed to be hitting someone else. Instead, they watched the fastest fighter in the tournament throw punches at empty space while a human woman stood there looking bored. Silas felt frustration building in his chest. He had never missed this many strikes against any opponent. He pushed harder, moving faster, using techniques he normally saved for championship-level fights. His body became a blur of motion, attacking from every direction. Maya continued to avoid everything. She moved like smoke, like shadow, like something that did not exist in solid form. The Veltari master who had analyzed her videos was watching from the stands, and he suddenly understood what he had missed before. She was not dodging the attacks. She was predicting them, moving before Silas even decided where to strike. This should have been impossible. Prediction required understanding an opponent's patterns, which required extended observation. Maya had never faced Silas before. She had no way to know his habits, his preferences, his tells. But she did know them. She had studied thousands of Veltari fights. She understood how their species moved, how their biology influenced their combat choices. Silas was fast, but he was still Veltari. He still attacked in the ways his body was designed to attack. And Maya had mapped every possibility before the fight even began. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. Silas was slowing down, his gill slits working overtime to supply oxygen to his exhausted muscles. He had thrown hundreds of attacks without landing a single one. His arms felt like they were made of stone. Maya remained exactly as she had been at the start, calm, still, barely breathing hard. Then, she moved. Her first strike was so fast that the slow-motion replays would later debate whether she had actually moved at all. One moment she was standing still. The next moment, her palm was pressing against Silas's chest. The Veltari champion flew backward across the arena. He landed hard on the fighting floor and did not get up. Medical teams rushed to check on him while the crowd sat in stunned silence. The match had lasted 11 minutes and 23 seconds. Maya had thrown exactly one strike. The screens displayed the result: winner by knockout, Ghost. The crowd exploded with noise, some cheering, some protesting, most simply trying to understand what they had witnessed. The announcers struggled to find words. The experts in the broadcast booth looked at each other in shock. Maya bowed toward her fallen opponent, then walked out of the arena without looking back. She had 5 more fights before the championship match. Each one would be harder than the last. Each opponent would know what she could do and would prepare accordingly. But Ghost was not worried. Ghost had never lost. And Ghost was just getting started. The tournament continued, and, with each victory, Maya became something more than a fighter. She became a phenomenon that the galaxy could not stop watching. Her second match was against a Gorvan warrior named Thick Stone, a being whose body was literally made of rock. The Gorvans were known for their incredible durability. They could take damage that would destroy any other species and keep fighting. Thick Stone had once been hit by a transport vehicle during a match and continued without pause. The experts predicted that Maya had no way to hurt such an opponent. Human hands would break against Gorvan stone. Human strikes would bounce off harmlessly. The best Maya could hope for was a long battle of endurance, trying to outlast an opponent who never tired. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Maya did not try to break through Thick Stone's defenses. Instead, she studied him as they circled each other, watching how he moved, how he balanced his heavy body, how he positioned himself for attacks. She found what she was looking for within the first minute: tiny gaps between the stone plates of his body, where softer material connected the pieces of his natural armor. Her first real attack targeted one of these gaps. Her fingers pressed against a spot on Thick Stone's neck where 2 plates met, and she applied pressure to a nerve cluster that most species did not even know Gorvans possessed. Thick Stone's arm went numb. A second strike disabled his other arm. A third dropped him to his knees. A fourth left him unconscious. The Gorvan medical team later admitted they had never seen anyone exploit those specific weaknesses before. They asked Maya how she had known where to strike. She told them she had studied Gorvan anatomy during her time at the university. It was just reading, she said. Anyone could have done it. But no one else had ever thought to try. Her third opponent was a Chitauri assassin known as Black Shell, one of the most feared fighters in the tournament. The Chitauri species possessed exoskeletons harder than most metals and limbs sharp enough to cut through steel. Black Shell had killed opponents in past tournaments, always within the rules, always with precise strikes that ended fights permanently. This was the first match that worried the humans watching from across the galaxy. Maya was fast and skilled, but the Chitauri were designed for killing. Their bodies were weapons. One lucky strike from Black Shell could end Maya's championship run forever. The match began differently than Maya's previous fights. Instead of waiting for her opponent to attack, she moved first. She rushed toward Black Shell with speed that surprised everyone watching, closing the distance before the Chitauri could prepare her defense. What followed was the fastest exchange of strikes in tournament history. Black Shell's razor limbs slashed through the air while Maya wove between them with millimeters to spare. The Chitauri clicked in frustration as her attacks kept missing, unable to understand how something so soft could avoid something so sharp. Maya did not stay defensive for long. She began inserting her own attacks between Black Shell's slashes, hitting specific points on the Chitauri's exoskeleton. Each strike seemed harmless, barely making contact, leaving no visible damage. But the Chitauri began to slow. Black Shell's movements became jerky, uncoordinated. Her limbs stopped responding properly. One leg gave out, then another. She collapsed to the ground, clicking desperately as her body refused to obey her commands. Maya had targeted the joints of her exoskeleton, the places where the hard plates connected to allow movement. She had not tried to break through the armor. She had simply jammed the machinery that made it work. The match ended with Black Shell unable to stand. Maya helped her opponent to the medical team, treating her with the same respect she showed all her defeated foes. The Chitauri looked at her with compound eyes full of something that might have been admiration. By the 4th round, Maya had become the most watched fighter in championship history. Her matches drew viewership numbers that broke every record. Beings who had never cared about combat tournaments before were tuning in just to see what the human ghost would do next. The betting markets had shifted dramatically. When Maya first entered the tournament, the odds against her winning were astronomical. Now, she was favored against almost every remaining opponent. Only one fighter still drew higher odds, Kraxus, the Graxian master who had dominated the championship for nearly a decade. Maya's fourth opponent was a Veltari speed fighter named Serena Waters, the student of the same master who had lost to Maya in the first round. Serena had watched her teacher's defeat and spent weeks analyzing every moment of that fight. She believed she had found weaknesses in Maya's style, patterns that could be exploited. The match lasted longer than any of Maya's previous fights, 27 minutes of constant motion. Serena was the first opponent who managed to actually hit Maya, landing a glancing blow to her shoulder that drew surprised gasps from the crowd. The human champion was not untouchable after all. But one hit was all Serena managed. Maya adjusted her style mid-fight, changing her patterns in ways that made her previous movements useless as reference. Every time Serena thought she understood where Maya would be, Maya was somewhere else. The Veltari's advantage of preparation became worthless against an opponent who could adapt faster than anyone expected. The fight ended when Serena collapsed from exhaustion. She had pushed herself beyond her limits, burning through energy reserves that should have lasted hours. Maya stood over her, breathing hard for the first time in the tournament, then offered her hand to help the fallen warrior stand. The fifth round brought Maya face to face with a legend. Orcs the Destroyer was a Crothian warrior who had competed in more tournaments than Maya had been alive. He was over 3 meters tall, covered in scars from hundreds of battles, and possessed a reputation for brutal efficiency. He had won championships on 6 different worlds and was considered the greatest Crothian fighter of his generation. He was also the uncle of the 4 Crothians Maya had defeated at the food stall on Kepler-7. The Crothian diplomatic family had pressured the tournament organizers to ensure this match happened. They wanted Orcs to avenge the family honor, to prove that the food stall incident had been a fluke, to destroy the human ghost on the biggest stage possible. Orcs entered the arena to thunderous applause from Crothian supporters who filled an entire section of the stands. He pounded his fists together, creating a sound like thunder that echoed through the stadium. His eyes locked onto Maya with undisguised hatred. This was not going to be like her other fights. This was personal. Maya understood this immediately. She could see the anger in Orcs's posture, the desire for more than just victory. He wanted to hurt her, to break her, to make an example of her for all the galaxy to see. He would not stop until she was destroyed or he was. The signal sounded. Orcs charged. His first attack was different from anything Maya had faced before. He did not try to hit her directly. Instead, he slammed his fists into the ground, creating a shockwave that threw Maya off balance. Before she could recover, he was there, massive hands reaching for her body. Maya twisted away, but not quickly enough. Orcs's fingers closed around her arm and lifted her off the ground. He swung her through the air like a toy, then threw her across the arena. She hit the floor hard, rolled, and came up on her feet. Her arm throbbed with pain where he had grabbed her, but nothing was broken. Not yet. Orcs was already charging again. This time, Maya did not try to avoid him. She ran toward him, surprising everyone including the Crothian himself. They met in the center of the arena, and what happened next would be debated by combat experts for years to come. Maya did something impossible. She caught Orcs's punch. The Crothian's fist, a weapon that could break steel, slammed into Maya's open palm. The force should have shattered every bone in her hand. Instead, she redirected it, turning his momentum against him, using his own strength to flip him over her shoulder. Orcs hit the ground with an impact that cracked the arena floor. He was back on his feet instantly, but now there was something new in his eyes: confusion. No one had ever caught his punch before. No one should have been able to catch his punch. The battle that followed was the longest and most brutal of Maya's career. Orcs was the strongest opponent she had ever faced, and he fought with the rage of someone defending their family honor. He was too tough for pressure points to work effectively, too experienced to be fooled by misdirection, too angry to exhaust himself through wasted attacks. Maya had to fight him directly, something she rarely did. She used techniques her grandfather had taught her for exactly these situations, methods designed for when all other options failed. She struck at joints and weak points, absorbed blows that she could not avoid, kept moving even when her body screamed for rest. 30 minutes into the fight, both warriors were bleeding. Korax had landed several hits that would have hospitalized a normal human. Maya had placed dozens of strikes against his armored body, slowly accumulating damage that was starting to affect his movement. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This was not the elegant, effortless Maya they had seen before. This was a different kind of fighter, one who could endure as well as evade, one who would not break no matter how hard the opponent tried. At 45 minutes, Korax began to slow. His rage had burned through his reserves, and the accumulated damage from Maya's strikes was taking its toll. His movements became labored, his attacks less precise. Maya saw her opening. She moved in close, inside the reach of his massive arms, and began a sequence of strikes that her grandfather had called the falling mountain. It was a technique designed to defeat opponents much larger than the user, a combination of pressure point attacks and structural disruptions that would bring down any enemy. Strike by strike, Korax began to fall. His knees buckled first, then his shoulders slumped. His arms dropped to his sides. His head bowed forward. Maya stepped back and watched as the greatest Crothian fighter of a generation collapsed to the arena floor. The medical teams rushed in. The crowd erupted with noise. Maya stood alone in the center of the arena, covered in blood that was mostly her own, and felt something she had not felt since her first match at the pit, exhaustion. But she had one. She had one fight left. The championship match. The week between Maya's victory over Korax and the championship match was the longest of her life. Her injuries from the Crothian fight required medical attention that kept her in the recovery facility for 2 days. When she finally emerged, she found that the galaxy had changed. Her name was everywhere. Every channel, every platform, every conversation seemed to involve Ghost, the human fighter who had done the impossible. Analysts debated whether she was the greatest fighter ever to compete in the championship. Historians compared her to legendary warriors from species that had been fighting for millennia. Philosophers wrote about what her success meant for the future of humanity in the galactic community. But none of that mattered to Maya. What mattered was the fighter waiting for her in the final match. Kraxus was not just the defending champion. He was considered by many to be the perfect fighter, the evolutionary peak of Graxian combat capability. His forearms could attack from multiple angles simultaneously. His body had been enhanced through decades of specialized training. His mind processed combat data faster than most computers. He had won the last 3 championships without ever being seriously challenged. His opponents fell before him like grass before a blade, unable to match his speed, his strength, his tactical brilliance. Some experts believed he was literally unbeatable, that no fighter in the galaxy could defeat him in single combat. Maya studied everything she could find about Kraxus. She watched recordings of all his matches, analyzed his techniques, memorized his patterns. She found what she expected to find: no obvious weaknesses, no clear vulnerabilities, no easy paths to victory. But she also found something else. Kraxus had never faced an opponent who could match his adaptability. Every fighter he defeated had used predictable strategies based on their species and training. They attacked in ways Kraxus expected, defended in ways he understood. None of them had ever surprised him. Maya was going to be different. The night before the championship match, her grandfather contacted her through the communication system. His face appeared on her screen, older and more tired than when she had left Kepler 7, but still sharp-eyed and proud. He asked her if she was ready. She told him she did not know. She had never faced anyone like Kraxus. She was not sure her training was enough. Her grandfather smiled and told her a story. When he was young, he had faced a master who everyone said was unbeatable. This master had trained for 50 years, had fought 1,000 battles, had never known defeat. Everyone told Maya's grandfather to surrender before the fight even began, to save himself from humiliation and injury. But he did not surrender. He fought anyway, using everything he had learned, adapting to every situation, refusing to accept that any opponent was truly beyond him. He lost that fight. The master was simply too experienced, too skilled. But, in losing, Maya's grandfather learned the most important lesson of his life, that the only true defeat was refusing to try. Victory was never guaranteed, but effort was always worthwhile. He told Maya that whatever happened tomorrow, she had already proven everything that needed to be proven. She had shown the galaxy that humans could stand among the greatest fighters of any species. She had inspired millions of people who had been told their entire lives that they were not good enough. Win or lose, she was already a champion. Maya thanked him for his words. Then, she asked him what had happened to that master he had faced decades ago. Her grandfather laughed. He said that Maya was looking at what happened. The master had been so impressed by the young man's spirit that he had taken him as a student. Everything Maya had learned, she had learned because of that lost fight. Sometimes, her grandfather said, defeat was just another kind of beginning. The championship arena was the largest Maya had ever seen. Over 500,000 beings filled the stands, with billions more watching from across the galaxy. The screen showed her face next to the face of Craxus, displaying the odds and statistics that everyone had analyzed to exhaustion. Maya walked to the center of the fighting floor and waited. She wore the same simple clothes she had worn in every match. Her grandfather's cloth was tucked into her pocket, close to her heart. Craxus entered from the opposite side. He was magnificent, there was no other word for it. His forearms moved with fluid grace, his body radiated power and control, his eyes assessed Maya with the cold calculation of someone who had never known real challenge. He did not speak, did not make threats, did not try to intimidate her. He simply took his position and waited for the signal. The final match of the Galactic Combat Championship began. Craxus attacked with all four arms simultaneously, coming at Maya from angles that no two-armed opponent could achieve. His strikes were perfectly coordinated, each arm covering the weaknesses created by the others. It was a storm of violence that should have been impossible to weather. Maya moved. She did not try to block or counter. She simply flowed between his attacks, finding spaces that should not have existed, exploiting gaps that closed almost before she could pass through them. Her body bent and twisted in ways that seemed to defy physics. Craxus adjusted, reading her patterns, predicting her movements. His next combination was designed to catch her no matter which direction she dodged. Maya changed her patterns. The Graxian master frowned, the first sign of confusion he had shown in years of fighting. This human was not moving the way humans moved. She was not even moving the way she had moved in her previous matches. Every time he thought he understood her, she became something new. The fight continued for 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. The crowd grew quiet as they realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Craxus had never fought this long against any opponent. His matches usually ended within minutes. But this human, this ghost, refused to fall. Maya knew she could not keep avoiding forever. Craxus was too good, his attacks too varied. Eventually, he would find her pattern and exploit it. She needed to change the nature of the fight. She attacked. Her first strike came without warning, between one evasion and the next. Her palm shot toward Craxus's chest with everything she had. He blocked it with 2 arms while the other 2 tried to catch her in a counterattack. She was already gone, slipping under his arms, striking at the back of his knee. He stumbled slightly, the first time anyone had seen him off balance in years. What followed was the most incredible exchange of combat ever recorded in galactic history. Maya attacked and retreated, attacked and retreated, never staying in range long enough for Craxus to catch her, never giving him time to fully adjust to her new patterns. She struck at joints, at pressure points, at the tiny gaps in his movement where his four-armed coordination became a weakness instead of a strength. Each hit was small, barely noticeable on its own. But they accumulated. Craxus began to slow. One arm started lagging behind the others. His footwork became slightly less precise. His breathing grew heavier. The crowd started to believe the impossible might happen. At 30 minutes, Maya made her move. She had been building toward this moment since the fight began, placing specific strikes in a specific pattern, preparing Craxus's body for what came next. She stepped inside his guard and began the falling mountain technique, modified for a four-armed opponent. Strike after strike landed against points she had already weakened, cascading effects through his nervous system, disrupting the coordination that made him unbeatable. Craxus tried to respond, but his arms would not obey. His body betrayed him, shutting down in ways he could not understand. He fell to one knee, then to both, then forward onto his hands. Maya stood over him, breathing hard, her body aching from the longest fight of her life. Craxus looked up at her. For the first time in his career, there was something other than certainty in his eyes. He asked her how she had done it. He had trained his entire life. He had mastered every technique, studied every opponent. He had believed himself to be perfect. Maya told him the truth. She said that perfection was an illusion. The universe was chaos, constantly changing, impossible to predict. The perfect fighter was not one who had mastered everything, but one who could adapt to anything. Her grandfather had taught her that the strongest warrior was like water, flowing around obstacles, filling whatever space was available, changing form without changing essence. Craxus had trained to be an unstoppable force. Maya had trained to be something that could not be stopped. The Graxian master bowed his head in acknowledgement of his defeat. Then, he collapsed completely, unconscious from the accumulated damage of Maya's strikes. The arena exploded with sound. The screens displayed the result that no one had believed possible: winner and new galactic combat champion, Ghost. Maya stood alone in the center of the fighting floor, surrounded by the roar of 500,000 voices. She thought of her grandfather, of her parents, of the old Gorvan woman at the food stall. She thought of every being who had ever been told they were not good enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. She had proven them all wrong. The ceremony happened an hour later, once Maya had received medical treatment and the arena had been prepared for the official proceedings. Administrator Zeal presented her with the championship trophy, a sculpture of pure crystal that represented the highest achievement in galactic combat. Maya accepted it with a bow, then did something that surprised everyone. She asked for a communication channel to address the entire galaxy. The request was granted. Her face appeared on screens across thousands of worlds, seen by trillions of beings who had watched her journey from quiet student to galactic champion. She spoke simply, without the grand words that others might have used. She said that she was just a person who had been taught by her grandfather to never give up. She said that humans were not special because of their bodies or their strength, but because of their ability to learn, to adapt, to refuse to accept limitations. She said that the championship trophy belonged not to her alone, but to everyone who had ever been told they could not achieve something and had tried anyway. It belonged to the weak who faced the strong, the small who stood against the large, the new who challenged the old. Then, she said something that would be remembered long after her fighting career ended. She said that the true victory was not defeating Craxus. The true victory was proving that anyone, from any species, could become more than what the universe expected them to be. All it took was the courage to try. Maya returned to Kepler-7 as a hero. The university that had almost expelled her now named buildings after her. The station that had worried about her causing trouble now celebrated her as their greatest representative. The Crothian diplomatic family quietly dropped all complaints and pretended they had never tried to have her punished. She went back to her studies, finishing her engineering degree with the same focus she had always shown. She graduated with honors, just as she had promised her parents she would. Her grandfather passed away peacefully 1 year after her championship victory. He had seen his granddaughter achieve more than he had ever dreamed, and he left the universe with a smile on his face. Maya continued fighting for another decade, defending her championship title against challengers from across the galaxy. She won some matches and lost others, because no fighter was truly unbeatable forever. But she always fought with the same principles her grandfather had taught her: respect for opponents, adaptation to circumstances, and the understanding that victory was never the only measure of worth. When she finally retired from competition, she did something unexpected. She opened a school on Earth, in the same small city where she had grown up. She taught anyone who wanted to learn, regardless of their background or abilities. She passed on the knowledge her grandfather had given her, the same techniques that had made her a legend. Some of her students became fighters. Others became teachers themselves, spreading her methods across the galaxy. A few became champions in their own right, carrying on the tradition that Maya had proven could produce miracles. But the most important thing Maya taught was not any technique or strategy. It was the simple truth she had discovered in the arena on Nexus Prime, that limitations existed only in the mind, that anyone could become more than they were expected to be, and that the universe belonged to those with the courage to claim their place in it. The story of Ghost, the quiet student who became an unstoppable fighter, spread to every corner of known space. It was told and retold, embellished and simplified, turned into entertainment and education and inspiration. But the core of the story never changed. A small human woman, from a species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and weak, had risen to the highest achievement in combat. She had done it not through aggression or anger, but through wisdom and adaptation. She had proven that the new species could stand among the old, that humans had earned their place in the galactic community. And she had done it all without ever forgetting who she really was: Maya Chen, granddaughter of a teacher, student of the universe, and guardian of a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. The channels that had first broadcast her food stall fight continued to show her story for generations. Her clash name, Ghost, became a symbol for human potential throughout the galaxy. Young fighters from all species studied her techniques and tried to understand her philosophy. But the true lesson of Maya Chen was not found in any recording or analysis. It was found in the simple truth that she had lived every day of her life, that the strongest fighter was not the one who never fell, but the one who always stood back up. And that was a lesson the entire universe would never forget.